Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic. A little dark. Let's do it. What's the worst way you think that someone could die? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. In Attila, the author described the way the Huns would kill an envoy to sow fear and set an example. This predates Vlad the Impaler by like 1500 years. I think a sharpened pole would be placed in the victim's anus, taking care to avoid internal organs. The pole would be pushed through the body along the spine, where it would eventually exit somewhere in the upper back. If done correctly, the victim could live for quite a while. I believe some victims were suspended from this pole like a rotisserie, while others adopted or were made to adopt the more traditional body on a pike aesthetic. Being eaten by a bear. The See You Next Tuesdays don't even have the decency to kill you first, just pin you down and start eating. And they generally start at the a-hole or gut, so you'll be alive for a while watching that thing eat you. I think the worst way to die as a human would be drowning in a rapidly moving body of water. That's the way my younger sister passed away. For context, I live in Arizona, and my family and I live by a road with a long wash that leads to the Verde River. On July 24th, 2021 at around 9 p.m., she was driving to a friend's house when she drove by the wash during an intense monsoon storm and was quickly swept away in a flash flood. She called 911 once she got swept away. She also managed to get out of the car but was carried off by the water. She threw her phone onto an embankment since it had Life 360 installed, so emergency personnel can get a glimpse of her last whereabouts. There was a nearly week-long search party that was out searching for her until they found her body on the banks of the Verde River. My family and I, along with our community, were extremely devastated by the news. I'm doing okay these days. I mainly work at my incredible job at a screen printing company, along with music on the side. To this day, I'm extremely careful when driving by a wash, especially during the monsoon season. Rest in peace, Faith Marie. Gone but never forgotten. 6/17/05, 7/24/2021. Spanish Donkey, Iron Maiden, Rat Torture, Blood Eagle, Skepticism, Brazen Bull, Saw Torture, Flaying Roman Candle, Poena Coeli, Impaling, Judas Chair, Bamboo Torture, Molten Gold Torture. The worst one for me is the Spanish Donkey. It was a triangle-shaped thing with a bunch of sharp spikes, and it was raised off the ground. They would make the victim sit on the device, which is already uncomfortable, and slowly add weight to the victim very slowly, cutting the victim in half from between the legs. For the guys, this was really painful because you know what's there. Thank you for your time. I've been in fire and EMS since 2013. I had a call early in my career that stuck with me. Old man fell down and no one heard him for several days. We got called out to a welfare check, forced his front door in, and found him laying on the ground in front of his living room chair and a solid end table with a phone on it. He was alive, but in a bad way. Turns out he fell and lacked the strength to get up and get the phone that was literally 24 inches from where he was laying. He lay there for 5 whole days. Afterwards, I got to thinking about it. The first day, he probably felt pretty good about someone coming to check on him. The second day, he probably still had some hope as well. But from the third day onwards, it was just a slow death, as what strength he had slowly faded to nothing. So, the worst way for me to die is slowly over days, inches from salvation, but lacking the strength to reach it. Yeah, that sounds terrible. It's the despair part of it that's just even worse. The Brazen Bull. Person is locked inside a hollow metal bowl. Fire is lit underneath. Metal burns the person to death, and the bowl is designed in such a way that the person's screams sound like a bellow coming from a bull's mouth. Scaphism. Person is tied down inside a hollow log and force-fed honey and milk until they vomit and have diarrhea all over themselves. Then insects and other animals eat them alive. 3. Keel hauling. Person is dragged underneath a ship, getting obliterated by sharp barnacles and marine growth over and over until they drown or bleed to death or are eaten by sharks. Humans are brutal, man. Also, Junko Furuta. Don't look her up unless you have a strong stomach. You've been warned. The tubes from the machines that keep you breathing are horrifying and extremely uncomfortable. You are isolated. You can't see anyone from your family. You stay in the hospital for days, weeks even, getting worse and worse, until either your body gives up or you start to recover, only to get a hospital infection because the staff is overworked and you finally die. The amount of time it takes for you to die and how much you suffer is unreal. Being sawn in half from the bottom up has proven to be excruciating, as well as being flayed open at the back and having your lungs hung over your shoulders and your organs punctured while kneeling seems pretty gruesome. Indians used to have some gnarly ways of unveiling or unaliving each other, like placing a few captives in a large leather sack with about a half a foot of water in the bottom, then hoisting them up in a tree and lighting a small fire under the sack. Not only did it boil the water, but it also caused the leather to slowly constrict until it eventually crushed the captives to death while steaming them alive, kind of like the metal bowls that were never really proven to be used by the ancient Romans. And then crucifixion was a tried and true method for inflicting max suffering. Just a few there off the top of my head that I know for a fact were used. Being crushed alive by a tank, your body being of course lined up. Maybe you guessed where that could have happened and who did it. Read it in the news. Of course, I'm not a sadist and never watch gore shit. It F's up your mind. I have an acquaintance which is on perma medication and goes regularly to the psychologist after being forced by friends to watch gore and torture videos. He is effed for life and has a regular panic attack because he forget what he saw. Poor guy. DNP overdose. Your body cooks itself from the inside out, turns you into a human sous vide. No antidote. They just stick you in an ice bath and run chilled blood and saline through you. Worst I've dealt with is traffic crashes. People can survive horrific injuries for a short period of time. A person's skull can be smashed to bits, and a person can survive it for a time, even remain partially conscious. Only thing that can be done for you then is to dose you with as much meds as to prevent you from feeling anything and wait for the inevitable. Alzheimer's. My stepdad had it, and it, together with leukemia, killed him, but not before stripping him of his sense after sense, first starting with his balance, then his memory, then his speech centers. Sometimes he would wake up in his room in the care home and realize all that was happening, in momentary spots of lucidity, and realized the blood cancer was eating him to the bone. The last photo of him made him look like a scarecrow, with a human skin sack draped over the branches. He would understand he was dying and had no way to stop falling apart, and he would scream. Scream and scream in terrified despair, then fall asleep again, as Alzheimer's makes you do. If I get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's at 70, I'm eating a gun once the symptoms start showing. F paying $30,000 to go to some Swiss room and lie down in a pod. Maybe something like what happened to Hisashi Oichi, though being skinned alive or burnt with steam, as other people say, would also suck. Ultimately, I think it would have to be some kind of torture that lasts for months until your body can't take it anymore and you die, somewhat similar to the aforementioned case of Hisashi Oichi. Being killed by someone who you considered a loved one. I had a friend who moved in with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, and one night he decided to murder her by stabbing her repeatedly. Later he called the police to say, "I hurt my girlfriend." Alright, so I noticed a lot of people have been answering with very short responses. Here's a long one. So, first we flay their skin in such a way where a lot of what's under the skin is exposed. The bleeding will be temporarily alleviated by rubbing salt into the wounds to cause pain, as well as allow the wounds to heal at a slow rate. This process is repeated until their body is in essence degloved. While this happens, A psychological response is produced by administering that pain at random intervals and leaving them, when not performing the flaying, in a state of sensory deprivation. Then, wires are inserted into their flesh to slowly administer electric shocks to their nerves to simulate burning. While this happens, they will be allowed to see anyone near to them undergo the same process from behind one-way glass. Additionally, they will be declared a criminal and completely defamed, ruining any future view of them as some sort of martyr. Then, while excess fat and flesh are being burned slowly like a slow roast, their ribcage will be forced open with some pain suppressants administered to allow them to feel most of the pain but not black out. Then their organs will be painfully removed with a rusty scalpel in order of biological importance. They will also undergo a lobotomy afterwards, given they're not dead already. Then, right before death, they will be desecrated by forcing their state into one which is damned by all major religions, whether that be by forcing them into committing unforgivable sins on their body itself, being manipulated in some way. Finally, the fire will be increased in heat, while rats and insects are introduced to the room for a proper send-off. Whoa. Who hurt you? Sounds pretty dark. Dog attack. It takes forever, and if they manage to kill you, you feel every bite and tear. If they don't, but they've torn through a vein, you just bleed out. Dog attacks are horrific ways to die. I say this as someone who, with 2 large bully breeds, dogs deserve more respect than they usually get. They're predators. I would think radiation overdose would be one of the worst. Those guys last month while their bodies liquefy and are only kept alive because we refuse to accept euthanasia is an okay thing, and they also want to study the poor people. I can't imagine spending 2 months knowing I'm going to die and watching my body liquefy while in extreme pain. Your immune system is gone, so you'll catch illness you're exposed to. Your DNA is shredded, so any new cells you get are already destroyed. There should be a law in every country that someone exposed to over X amount of sieverts of radiation may receive immediate euthanasia. I remember in 1000 Ways to Die, my least favorite was a guy in a porta potty being run over feet first by a steamroller. So he was covered in shit while his internal organs were forced out of his mouth like a can of toothpaste before it finally crushed his skull. Their entire family, all their friends and loved ones abandoned them. Then they're placed in a pitch-black room with no windows. All the walls and floors are padded, and they're in a straitjacket. They are force-fed psychedelic mushrooms as their mental state booms, so they endure the most effed up hallucinations the human mind can conjure. They'll experience 1,000 fates worse than death until they slowly die of malnutrition or dehydration. I thought that torture method of putting them in the brass bowl and heating it, slowly cooking inside while trying not to touch the metal you're laying against or get burned sounds brutal, though I did watch a video of a dude getting attacked by a shark a few days ago on Reddit and felt sick to my stomach. I watched this one episode of Mentalist where the dude died inside of a coffin. He was murdered by being forced into the coffin and the coffin was shut. I believe that must be the most scary way to die. No place to move your legs or arms. You'll slowly die of either hunger, fear, thirst, or suffocation. Your legs and arms will hurt so bad due to cramps, and no one can hear you if you shout. You'll sweat like crazy because of the heat. It's probably the biggest fear I have in my life. That's why I want to be cremated when I die. Fire. Anything involving heat, flames, whatever. I've broken bones, cut myself to the bone, blew out an entire finger like a zit from crushing it under weights, had all my wisdom teeth yanked out with only poorly applied local anesthetic, dealt with chronic back pain for about 7 years, lost my best friend suddenly without warning, and I'm currently watching what little family I have all die from addiction, while being the only person in my own life that seems to have a tenacity to better myself. All of that I could deal with. All of that I sucked up, kept a level head, didn't overreact. I slipped at McDonald's in my early 20s and landed on the grill and ended up with third-degree burns on my hands, fused my gloves into my skin. You want to talk about pain? Agonizing, horrible, pulsing pain. It sent me into an effing rage. I didn't feel anything but my throbbing hands and the desire to break absolutely everything around me, which I subsequently did. I've never before or since experienced anything even remotely in the same ballpark. Tooth pain is a runner-up, but only due to the longevity. My worst cavity couldn't hold a candle to the peak of that pain about 15 minutes after it happened, so yeah, burning to death. Definitely my biggest fear. The girl that died in the catacombs has to be up there. That is truly horrific and depressing to think about. Partying on New Year's Eve, go into the catacombs with your friends, get lost and separated, look and scream for them for literally days in the pitch black, getting more and more lost, until finally, literally, just laying down to die. A few years ago, a drunk and high driver went straight through a Y intersection, hit parked cars, and drove through the side of a restaurant, breaking gas lines in the kitchen. The passenger had to be put out with a fire extinguisher. He spent the rest of his life in the burn unit, dying 17 months after the accident. 17 months. Damn. Terrible. I had the tops of my feet burned off because someone dropped scalding tea on the thick wool socks I was wearing, which just aborted the water and cooked my feet. Second-degree burns. I got a nurse visit me at home to change my bandages for 2 weeks until I had to go back to the hospital to have the dead tissue removed. It was like peeling skin off of an oven-roasted chicken. Healed completely back to normal. It was a level of pain I never experienced before, and the morphine barely did a thing to subside it.